Great being with you guys, and it's just so impressive to see this situation has grown so much from an event that we had at St. Francis 6 years ago to what it is right now. But I want to talk to you about a project that I'm engaged with that I think will resonate with you in your life. Throughout this day, we're going to be discussing what it means to be a Catholic man in our contemporary world, because the world gives us all kinds of reasons or things of what we're not supposed to do, but they're pretty slow about telling us how to be good, outstanding Christian men in our lives. You know, you don't beat your wives, don't get drunk, don't go steal stuff. We know what we're not supposed to do, but sometimes what we're supposed to do, it doesn't come clear. But I want to share for the next few minutes, I will introduce to you a man who has actually come to our community, was a professional in his craft, and manifested tremendous courage and was dedicated to his life to God. In thinking about what traits a contemporary man should manifest, they are experience, courage, skill, compassion, and holiness. I believe that Captain Leonard LaRue manifested all these qualities of holiness. Before I go any further, I wish to mention Phil Lacavera and his biography on Captain LaRue, The Mariner and the Monk. And this is available on from Amazon, Kindle, different things like that. The Mariner and the Monk, Captain Leonard LaRue, Brother Marinus, and the Rescue at Hungnam. It's available, as I said, in different formats through Amazon. Under the title of Experience, LaRue was born in Philadelphia in 1914. After high school, he entered the Pennsylvania Nautical School, where he graduated with a third mate license in 1934. However, his first job was as a quartermaster, which is the guy the rating who drives the ship, and he in fact came to Port Arthur to the Atlantic Refining Company on 3 occasions in 1934 between June and December. So it's really interesting. In Port Arthur, we have had both Catherine Drexel walk on the streets there before she became a saint, and also servant of God, Brother Marinus. He gradually rose through the ranks, becoming an unlimited master during World War II. Under the question of courage, with the beginning of World War II, he was assigned as second mate on the Mar vessel for Moore McCormick Lines. Joining the ship in February of 42, they convoyed across the Atlantic to Scotland and then to Reykjavik, Iceland, where they joined up and made up PQ-13, which sailed from there to Murmansk. Now, the Mar suffered no direct hits, but of the 19 merchant ships part of that convoy, 5 of them were sunk by German U-boats, surface ships, as well as the Luftwaffe. As an ensign, there was an ensign on board named Harrison Smith, and he was the commander of the armed guards who were on the ship with them, the Naval Armed Guards, and he said, a few minutes later, a large bomber flew directly overhead in the now clearing skies. It was still twilight. None of the escorting vessels used their guns. A few minutes later, the same plane came out of the cloud at an altitude of approximately 2,000 feet off our port quarter and released 2 bombs. The first one hit more than 100 yards off the quarter, and the second was a near miss. We were the only ship to open fire, but since we had only 30 and 50 caliber machine guns, our effective fire was not very great. The only damage to the Mar from the near miss were 3 broken bearing caps on the propeller shaft. There we go. Yep. So skill. While captain on the Mar ship, the Meredith Victory, in September of 1950, he received orders to join the Incheon landing convoy with General MacArthur. On the night of September 13th, 1950, the convoy was overtaken by the Typhoon Kazuya. Sailing in the midst of the typhoon, the Meredith Victory was taking 50-foot seas on her port quarter, and during the watch change between the second and third mate, They watched the ship take a hard starboard roll and hung there. Much of the deck cargo, which include trucks and tanks, slid across the deck and hung on the starboard rail. Captain LaRue was on the bridge before the mates called him, and as the third mate, Burley Smith, relates, silently timing the waves and the motion of the ship for a few moments, LaRue calmly ordered the helmsman hard left rudder and told Smith to order full ahead, and in the engine order telegraph. No one spoke as the ship slowly turned through the perilous point where the seas were on the beam. When the ship steadied on course with a small angle to the wind and waves, the captain ordered slow ahead to keep the Meredith Victory pointing into the sea, waiting out the storm. LaRue, with some 2 decades at sea and months of stormy weather under his belt, knew that the time saved in getting the ship around into the wind and out of the quartering seas was the most important. Under the question of compassion, the Incheon landing was in fact a great success. Allied forces cut North Korean forces and began marching north. Things changed quickly on October 13th, 1950. The Chinese People Volunteer Army crossed the Yalu River and entered the war. Allied forces were quickly pushed back in the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, and the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir began. 120,000 Allied forces retreated toward the ports of Hungnam and Wonsan, with more than 100,000 North Koreans also traveling with them at that time. During this time, the Meredith Victory was ordered to sail immediately for Hungnam, where she joined more than 100 ships taking part in the evacuation. On December 21st, Colonel Chiles boarded the Meredith Victory and asked Captain LaRue would he take his ship into the mined harbor of Hungnam and take away the last refugees who were in the city. The staff officer, Robert Lunny, describes the situation in this way. Captain LaRue and his crew could see the crowds of refugees in the direction of Shojin. Colonel Childs and his colleagues described the defense situation around Hungnam, the fact that the Marines of the 7th Infantry had already redeployed, and the fact that thousands of civilians were trying to escape the oncoming communists. Without hesitation, Captain LaRue said, we will do what we can. Chief Mate Dino Savastino recalled LaRue saying, we will take all you have. Regardless of the wording, LaRue agreed to transport the unprecedented number of 14,000 refugees. And so on December 22nd, the Meredith Victory docked on the outboard side of the Nor Cuba and began boarding North Korean refugees. And this process continued until the refugees were on board and the crew began to prepare for sea at 11 o'clock the next day. In all, the Meredith Victory loaded 14,000 refugees on a 455-foot Victory ship. Catch up here. You can see it was literally shoulder to shoulder at that time. They arrived in Pusan on December 24th, and because of the number of refugees already in the cities, they were directed to Jeojido Island, where they arrived on Christmas Day, not with 14,000 that they left with, but with 14,005, because 5 women had babies along the trip also. And nobody died, and this was a very, very frigid and horrible winter. Captain LaRue, years later, reflected on the voyage and said, I think often of that voyage. I think of how much the vessel was able to hold so many persons and surmount endless perils without harm to souls. And as I think, the clear, unmistakable message comes to me that on that Christmastide, in the bleak and bitter waters off the shores of Korea, God's own hand was at the helm of my ship. He manifests also a great deal of holiness that was there. In May of 1954, Captain LaRue became ill and was hospitalized in Japan, where he was operated on to remove an infected kidney. And during his recuperation, he rethought his path there and decided to enter into the Benedictine monastery of St. Paul Abbey in Newton, New Jersey. And that's the old building that was there. His religious faith and holiness did not go unnoticed by the crewmen while he was sailing. And so as crewman Sam Graham says, The man was a born seaman and a saint. He seemed to know when to take his ship off one course and put it on another and avoid rough weather. We all knew he said prayers every day, and many of his shipmates joined him. I never heard him use a curse word for the whole time I was with him. He never took the name of God in vain. As Phil Lacavera, in his book, The Monk and the Mariner, has said, okay, there we go, has pointed out, it was just a short time after he entered St. Paul's Abbey as a guest that LaRue decided he had found his true vocation. He requested to join the order and was admitted as a postulant, the first stage of joining the Order of St. Benedict on Thanksgiving Day in November 26, 1954. When he entered the Benedictine Abbey, he took the name of Brother Marinus and lived there as a porter, guest master, and Abbey gift shop clerk, and he died on October 14, 2001, after living as a Benedictine brother for 47 years. And so I'm engaged in the cause for sainthood that was initiated by the Diocese of Paterson, New Jersey, where the St. Paul Abbey is located. And with the initiation of the process, Brother Marinus has now received the title of Servant of God, which is the first step on the way to a cause for sainthood. And so what I'm asking you to do today is, one, to go by my table over here on the right-hand side and pick up a holy card, pick up the little trifold that we have and learn more about Brother Marinus that's there. Pick up some extra ones so that you can spread this cause around to other people also. Ask for his intercessions in a time of trouble, in need, of stress, of difficulty. And also join the Brother Marinus Guild so that the funds that are necessary to be raised for a cause, which is in the neighborhood of about $80,000 to $100,000, will be able to be raised, and we'll have the resources to take care of it. I will be at the booth for the rest of the day, or at least until Mass time, because then I've got to get back to my parish, and I will be happy to talk to you more about that. But I really want to thank Andy and the guys for allowing me to share a bit of this story of Captain LaRue. Thank you very much.